We will now move on to our lesson. We're still on Rule 3 of White Magic, and we'll post this for the world to see. I hope you guys don't mind. Rule 3 reads this: the energy circulates. The point of light, the product of the labors of the four, waxeth and groweth. The myriads gather round its glowing warmth until its light recedes, its fire grows dim. Then shall the second sound go forth. Okay, the second sound is kind of interesting. Tibetan really never talks about it the way I've come to interpret it, which was that whenever you create a work of any kind, you start it out and then you reach a point to where it's not working out exactly the way that you plan, and you have to revamp your plans. And in the revamping of your plans, you have a second sound that goes forward. And that was an interpretation that came to me. Also, the same idea came to Curtis. And so it seems like when you do any type of work, you have a first sound where you like test the waters and find out what works and what doesn't. Then when you find out what works and what doesn't, then you make a second sound that goes forth. So anyway, that's an interesting interpretation of that. Now, the Tibetan says that Rule 2 and 3 are really intertwined. So he says he's not completely done with Rule 2 here, that he's going to kind of synthesize them together. But in the meantime, all we got talked about in Rule 3 is that the energy circulates. What does that mean, the energy circulates? We talked about that a little last week. The energy circulates. What does that mean? Okay, let's see who is paying attention. Anybody?
And let me ask, you're saying the energy circulates, energy as individuals or hierarchical energies, or us as an individual, as we think we create an energy, you know, because after thought is energy.
Okay, yeah, all that's true. But there's specific energies that in circulation that he talks about in this rule.
I'll take a shot if nobody else does.
Okay.
Well, the spine stuff, the negative and positive thing, that's circulating. And he was talking about how, at like the higher initiations, the positive is going to dominate, but the point the disciple or aspirant is trying to achieve is kind of a balanced middle way.
Okay, well, you're pretty close. The basic, and it is up and down the spine there, that is part of the circulation. But when he talks about the energy circulating, he's talking about the energy circulating between the lower and higher self. So there's energy in circulation by the time we get to Rule 3 that's circulating between you and your own soul. Okay, so that's where the circulation of energy is. Now he talks about, he was talking about the thought form of the plan that is revealed. When you have soul contact, one of the main purpose and one of the things that brings higher contact is when you contemplate being part of the great plan. There's a plan that's bigger than all of us, that is in existence, that even the masters don't know all of the plan, but they know part of the plan. And each one of us, as we make higher contact, get a piece of the plan. And so one of the benefits of soul contact is you get a piece of the plan in your consciousness, something that you're supposed to do to make the greater plan materialize. In other words, we, each of us, have to do our part to make the plan materialize. As each of us achieve soul contact, then each of us become a piece of the puzzle that make the whole plan visible and real. The first part of making this making the thought form of the plan manifest happens through outer symbols and life experience and participating in some type of group activity for the greater good of the whole. Okay, so the first part is an outward working toward that benefits the plan. The second part is establishing soul contact, so you hear the inner voice. So you hear the inner voice, and first of all, you get some type of impression to do some type of work. Then that impression leads to a greater contact from within. So you get inner guidance from your soul, and eventually you know you're getting some type of inner guidance, and you're sure about this guidance and direction that you're getting. And the third is the disciple sounds the sacred word on the physical plane, blending the voice of the ego and the soul. Now that's an interesting statement, blending the voice of the ego and the soul. How do you blend the voice of the ego and the soul? Any ideas on that?
Do you think he's referring to the ego the way we refer to it, or the way he usually does?
Oh, that's a good question. Here, I think he's talking about the lower self, because the higher ego, when he talks about that, he's usually meaning the higher self. That's a good point, Joshua. Okay.
Does it mean you have to live understanding of the soul interception with us, but at the same time living as a man, because you have to live in the lower realm and the higher realm at the same time. So you're acknowledging both the higher realm, the soul realm, and living in the physical realm at the same time, acknowledging both of them.
Yeah, that's an important point. He says the disciple becomes the Word incarnated at this point, and he endeavors to be what he is.
Yeah,
That's
so it's like you learn to walk the walk and talk the talk.
Yeah,
and that makes it that helps bring it into your reality in the physical or the world of form by talking about the things you get from the soul. You help clothe them in form.
that's exactly right. He says he sounds the word within himself, seeking to do it as the soul. He visualizes himself as the soul, breathing out energy through the medium of that word through the entire system which his soul animates, his mental, emotional, and physical instruments. He sounds the word literally on the physical plane, thus affecting the 3 grades of matter in his environment. So he sounds the word as a soul. What does that mean to sound the word as a soul?
What is the word is that the word that when I see that written a lot of times, saying sound the word.
Right, he's usually referring to he's usually referring to the Om when he talks about the word. Sometimes he's referring to the AUM. Okay, to sound it as a soul then, you visualize yourself as the soul. Remember that you and your soul or your higher self are actually one. You're a reflection. Think of it as being in a dream. When you're in a dream, you are still you. Okay? So I'm JJ, so if I'm in a dream and I become aware, I think, well, wait, I'm not this character in the dream. I'm really JJ having this dream. So we need to have this attitude toward the soul. We could say, wait, I'm not just me, Cindy or Sharon or Rit down here. I am my soul. I am really that higher entity, but I just haven't realized it. So we have to come to this realization when we sound the Om. When you sound the Om, you visualize yourself as actually being in the higher spheres as your soul, sounding the Om with you. When you do that, it has much more power to create effects.
That's something I point out to the people that I've guided or taught, whatever. I tell them, it's like, if you want to become something greater, if you want to become a master or a doctor, the first thing you have to do is you have to begin to act as if you are a master, or act as if you are, and that helps to imprint it, I guess, on your
oh yeah, that's a really important point, and DK talks about that, acting as if, several times throughout his work, and that's what he's pointing out here also. You have to act as if you are the soul. Okay, so let's do that right now. Let's sound the Om and visualize yourself merging with your higher self. Visualize your soul saying the Om the same time you are. Okay, visualize not just you saying it. Another way to do it is visualize you and God saying it together. You know, sometimes the word God is easier or than the higher self, because the higher self is your connecting link to God. Okay, we're going to try this out a couple times. Om 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 om. Okay, you guys had to endure just listening to me, since we didn't have audio on the rest of you saying the Om, but I'm sure that you were participating. But hopefully you could feel a nice vibe there coming through. But the more you visualize your higher self saying the Om with you, the more powerful the Om will be. Then DK says this, and he carries forward, the disciple carries forward, and this is the most difficult stage, a paralleling activity of a steady visualization of the thought form through which he hopes to express that aspect of the plan which he has contacted, and which he hopes to bring into active being through his own life and his own environment. He begins to learn a triple activity. Okay, so in addition to saying the Om, then visualize what you're going to do as your part of the plan. Figure out what your part of the plan is, and for those that are in this group here, most of you feel that a part of the plan is the creation of the molecular relationship. Now, keep in mind that a part of the plan is always something that hasn't completely materialized yet on the earth. And for many different people, it's different things. Some people, it may be helping the poor, or teaching a certain principle, or accomplishing a certain act, or increasing freedom in certain areas of human thought. Different people have different aspects of the plan revealed to them. And there's a lot of people working on an aspect of the plan that we don't know anything about, that we have no contact with, and they aren't in the news anywhere. But many people get some type of inspiration of something they're supposed to do. And sometimes people that get these highly motivated to do a work aren't even aware that they're part of any plan. They just feel an impulse to do a job, and they're out there doing it. And that impulse actually came from their soul, and they're doing something that's a part of the great plan. One of the things that's part of the plan is seasteading. A lot of people are getting an impulse to create cities on the sea, which will be completely self-governing and free from any governments. And there's a lot of people have an impulse to do something like this, and that's they're getting a piece of the plan, and some powerful, influential, and wealthy people are attempting to make that happen, and they'll be paving the way for a future gathering of lights. Okay, then he gives a quote from the old commentary, and I'll read that to you. The solar orb shines forth in radiant splendor. The illuminated mind reflects the solar glory. The lunar orb rises from the center to the summit and is transformed into a radiant sun of light. When these three suns are one, Brahma breaks forth, a lighted world is born. You know, for people not familiar with the Tibetan, and even many of those that are, they will say, boy, those words are beautiful, but I don't have a biggest idea what they mean. But one thing you can tell from reading the words, and that's what happened I remember the very first time I read anything from DK, I was in college. I was about 21 or 22, and I went into this used bookstore, and I was looking through the kind of little bit of supernatural type books. And of all things, the bookstore owner came up to me, and he pulled a Alice A. Bailey book, Treatise on Occult Meditation, off the shelf, and he handed it to me, and he says, oh, you might be interested in this book. And I looked at it, and I thought, boy, that sounds interesting. Then I opened it up, and I read the list of other books by Alice A. Bailey, Treatise on Cosmic Fire, and Treatise on the Seven Rays, and I thought, wow, what in the world is cosmic fire?
That's the book you don't want to start with.
Yeah, right. And so what kind of sold me on it was that list of books. I thought the very provocative titles. So I bought the book, took it back to my digs, and opened it up, read 3 pages, and I immediately recognized great intelligence there, but it didn't go along with what I believed at the time. For instance, I didn't even believe in reincarnation at the time. And but I put it on the shelf thinking I may read this book later on, and that's essentially what happened. But anyway, the words, even if you've never read the Tibetan, when you read these words, especially anything from the old commentary, they're so deep. And even if you don't understand them, you realize there's depth there. There's great intelligence in the way these words are put together. Okay, let's go through this a little bit. The solar orb shines forth in radiant splendor. Any idea what the solar orb is?
The mental concept.
Solar orb
Literally, I'm thinking, is the sun, JJ?
well, it is a sun in a way of speaking. It's actually the soul. The
Solar angel.
Yeah, the solar orb is the soul or the solar angel. Okay? So the soul, in other words, shines forth in radiant splendor. The illuminated mind reflects the solar glory. The lunar orb rises from the center to the summit. What's the lunar orb? The lunar orb, does anybody know? If nobody knows, I'll continue.
Isn't it the solar plexus?
Oh, good.
Astral.
Great. You're right. The solar orb is the astral or the solar plexus. And great. Somebody's been reading the material. Okay. The solar orb or the solar plexus rises from the center to the summit and is transformed into a radiant sun of light. So what raises up the solar plexus? What does that mean? Raising up the solar plexus from the center, in other words, right around the navel area is the center, up to the summit. Okay, up to the summit, the solar plexus is linked to what higher center? Solar plexus represents the lower emotions. What represents the higher emotions? Which center? Oh, Sharon says the heart.
Chakra?
Right, right. Sharon says the heart. Okay, so the heart center. So the solar plexus rises up to the heart center. In other words, the heart center and the solar plexus becomes one. Okay, and it's transformed into a radiant sun of light. When these three suns are one, Brahma breaks forth, a lighted world is born. So, what are the three suns? The three suns are the soul, the mind, he says, and the light in the head. So these three suns. Now, when you make a soul connection, you'll wind up seeing a little bit more light in the head than the normal person would. You can close your eyes and you will see more light than you saw before, because the soul and the mind and the light in the head become one, and you become a sun, so to speak. When you become a sun, you become more someone that will spread light to your fellow man. So you be in a group, even if you're at a party and you start talking and somebody will say something maybe a little screwy, and you will give your opinion, and it'll make everybody think, because you will be a transmitter of light. You will be a sun to everybody that you come in contact with. Now, some people love darkness more than light, unfortunately. So if you're a sun and you're around people that love darkness more than light, what's going to be their reaction?
They're not going to want you around.
Right, they won't want you around. They'll want to put out the light. They'll want to diminish the light. They'll want to return to their comfort zone of the shadows. So, but when a sun is around other suns, then there's a lot of joy and communication and a knowing between two people that are sons, so to speak. He said the disciple must blend and fuse the energies of the lower two centers of force. Raise these fused energies, so blending with the energies of the other and the higher centers, they reach the head. So the goal of all the lower energies is to blend with the head. Now, the solar plexus is still down there no matter how far along the path you are. But the energies of the solar plexus and the sacral, and the lower part, the lower personality, is dominated by the higher centers. The higher centers is the sacral center, which governs sex, needs to blend with the throat, and the throat governs creative activity. So the sacral center will eventually lend its energy to the creative force. Now, Napoleon Hill talks a lot about this and being successful. He talks about how many people are not very successful until they're about 40, because their sacral center, or their sexual energies, he doesn't talk about the centers, but he says their sexual energies are so potent when they're young, it's a distraction to them. But he says when they get in their 40s, it's not as much of a distraction, and they can focus on the creative energies. And he says people start being a lot more successful and productive in life after right around the age of 40, he says, because of this. So that's an interesting point. Now, that doesn't mean a younger person can't. It just takes more control on his part, because a younger person in their 20s, oftentimes the sacral energies are so powerful that it takes a lot of focus on his part to focus, to channel them in a creative direction rather than just seeking for satisfaction, and using the energies in that lower direction only. Okay, now the great part about the lower energies from the sacral and the lower emotions is they are not to be nullified or done away with. But when the higher energies control, then the lower energies are actually more fulfilled. It's based on this principle, is that the higher can fulfill the lower, but the lower cannot fulfill the higher, and the lower can't even fulfill itself. So the lower needs the higher to bring it into fulfillment. Now, this is especially...
JJ, is that,
yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Is that what you were talking about earlier with the lower self blending with the higher self?
Well, that's a stage we have to go through to make that happen. The lower self can't blend with the higher self till the lower energies are dominated.
Yeah. The lower self,
right, okay.
The lower self provides enthusiasm.
Yeah, right. And this is a thing that turns a lot of people off the spiritual path, as they say, well, I like my lower nature, you know. Well, the lower nature is there for a purpose, and it can be used, but it needs to be dominated by the higher. So you can fulfill the lower nature and make it more pleasurable and more usable when the higher dominates. The higher doesn't want you to like suffer, but it wants you to be fulfilled. But the lower doesn't know how to fulfill itself. You watch somebody that's very emotional, making very emotional decisions. Their decisions will all be wrong, all be against their best interest, and they'll wonder why their life is so screwed up. Their life is so screwed up because they're making all their decisions based on what the lower intelligence from the lower centers want. And when they do this, it always leads to disaster. And the only benefit from that is we learn from disasters. But eventually, the lower self needs to be sublimated to the higher self, because the higher self can fulfill the lower. And then when we get focused on the higher part of ourself, the higher part of ourself has a higher part still that it needs to be linked to have complete fulfillment for it. Because, say, the higher mind and the lower mind, the higher emotions and lower emotions, the higher mind and the higher emotions get a little frustrated with the lower. So they learn how to get fulfillment themselves by being linked up the chain to higher lives above them. So there's always this is the key to fulfillment, is a link. And Jesus talked about this when he says, I am the tree and I'm the vine and you are the branches. He says, if the branches are severed from the vine, he says, they wither and die. He says, but if you're connected, you will live. And this is the way it is. We're like a great tree or a great vine, a great tree of life, and we're all connected branches. But the branches need to be connected to thrive, to have life flow through them. Okay, when we are connected, then we can enter the path to fulfillment, which is opposite of what many people think, is that many people don't enter the spiritual path because they think they're going to have to give up being fulfilled. And the truth is just the opposite. By entering the spiritual path and being subject to higher energies, we will find the path to fulfillment and joy, greater happiness, greater everything. Okay, any comment before we move along?
So we're basically speaking of transmutation, right? Transmuting the lower supreme energy in the lower self, like
That's
a sexual energy. As a person older, they transmute that energy into a creative energy.
That's right. That's right. We have to transmute the lower into the higher, so the lower and the higher become like one functioning unit. Okay, and when the lower is transmuted into the higher, then they both benefit. The higher has more range, and the lower has more fulfillment. Now, the effect upon the lesser and more material states is primarily fourfold, he says. First, when this happens, he says we have a stimulation of the spiritual aspect expressing itself as the soul in all forms, such as the form of a mineral, a flower, or an animal. Okay, so what happens when man himself, he says, is we as individuals are of the lower nature trying to contact the higher. But he says the human race as a whole is the same thing. We have the higher correspondence of the individual as the human race as a whole. And the human race as a whole is attempting to contact its higher nature. Okay. Now, can you imagine? Well, this is strange.
Yeah, I saw that. Something just.
Oh, I don't know what that was about. Okay. The human race as a whole is trying to contact its higher nature. And as you, what? Can you see me okay?
Troy got on. Troy just got on.
Troy did?
Yeah.
Okay, welcome, Troy.
That's what he saw.
Okay, the human race as a whole is trying to contact its higher nature, and in doing so, several things will happen. He says we have an influence on all the three lower kingdoms. There's a correspondence between your personality, which is composed of the mind, emotions, and the physical realm. Okay. Now, for the human race as a whole, the human race is almost, as it progresses, becomes like the soul, and its lower nature is the animals, the plant kingdom, and the mineral kingdom. Okay, and just like the soul radiates and connects and benefits its lower parts, so will the human race benefit the animals, the plant, and the mineral kingdom. Now, right now, it doesn't look like we're doing that very good. And why is that? Why does it seem like we're doing damage to, or why is it that we have done damage to the animals, the plants, and the mineral kingdom? Why is that? We polluted. We've deforested a lot of the earth. We've taken from the earth, and we have all kinds of people complaining about human beings being just a virus. A lot of environmentalists think we need to, most of the humanity needs to be destroyed so the earth can thrive. But DK says it's just the opposite. He says that we are the savior of the earth. But why is it that we haven't appeared that way so far?
We hadn't grown up yet.
That's exactly right. Just like a little kid. Remember when you were a little kid, you didn't care about life that much? Maybe you found flies and dissected it.
Or used a magnifying glass on anthills.
Yeah, right. Did all kinds of stuff. When you're a little kid, you didn't care if you killed a bunch of ants or destroyed their habitat or shot some birds or whatever. You just didn't think about it unless somebody taught you what to do. But as you grew up, especially those that become disciples, they become a lot more sensitive to life. I mean, who among us now, when we see the anthill, goes and jumps up and down on it like a little kid might? We wouldn't think about doing that unless the ants were very intrusive in our own property. Then we might do something about them. But if the ants aren't bothering anybody, we aren't going to bother them. And that's the way disciples look at it. But just like when we were young and we did destructive things without thinking, so when humanity is young, it's done a lot of destructive thinking. Like, for instance, we went and shot all those buffalo, just for sport. That was really one of the craziest things humanity's ever done. Used to be a tremendous number of buffalo roamed in the western states. And when the white man went west, he just shot them for sport. They thought it was fun to shoot them and let them rot there in the sun. And they almost went extinct because of that. Fortunately, we come to our senses when we salvaged them, and now you can buy buffalo meat in the store because we've managed to save them, and they're starting to thrive somewhat again. But as we mature, he says, we will throw out an energy. As we as individuals make the connection between us and the soul, we will throw out an energy that will benefit the lower kingdoms. And it will be kind of, it won't be obvious always, but it will be a radiating energy that we send forth. And he says a number of things will happen, such as there'll be increased radioactivity, there'll be increased diversity, there'll be new species just materialize out of the blue. New types of minerals found, plus man will develop new types of minerals. What types of, what things have we developed in the mineral world that wouldn't exist without us?
Monatomic.
What's that? What'd you say, Rick?
Oh, monatomic gold.
Yeah, that's kind of an esoteric one, isn't it? A more common one would be just like plastics, for instance. Plastics are everywhere. Synthetic fibers. We don't have to go pick cotton anymore. And we've got new ones. So we've got different carbon compounds which are stronger than diamonds. they're going to make a rope that will connect us to a connecting point in space, so that we can create a space elevator on ropes that are so powerful, made of new types of carbon fibers that are made by us, that will support a rope extending from the Earth to space, and that will not break. It will create a space elevator, so we will be able to send up payloads into outer space much cheaper than we can by using rockets. That's just a couple of examples there. And he says, we will eventually bring the end of suffering to animals. Now, all the environmentalists are complaining all the damage we do to animals, that the animals can only really thrive if we just leave them alone and leave them as they are. But the animals in the wild don't live that great of a life. It kind of dawned on me when we went on a hayride one time to feed some elk. There's a farmer that lives 150 miles north of us that goes and has these hayrides, and he goes and feeds the elk in the middle of winter. And we all went on this hayride, and we went out, and if you don't stand up, the elk will not be afraid. They will. If you stand up, then they'll all run. But if you sit down, for some reason, they don't recognize you as a threat. So we went out there, and the elk would just come right up to where we were. And it was snowing outside. There was a lot of snow outside. It was cold. And I was watching these elk, and they were about half starving to death. And he was feeding them these bales of hay, and they were just really hungry. And a lot of them would have starved to death if this farmer hadn't helped out these elk by feeding them. And by charging for the hay rides, it kind of paid him for the hay that he went and fed these elk. And I was looking at those elk, and I thought, boy, you know, these poor elk, they live a really uncomfortable life in the wintertime. I mean, people think, yeah, it's great that they are free in the wild, but, you know, they are not very comfortable.
Life is tough when you're a dumb animal.
Right. And it kind of made me think about how tough some of the wild animals have it. And the animal kingdom has a really tough life. And if there's a forest fire, a lot of them just get burned to death. And then a lot of them have to eat the other animals and hunt them down in order to survive. So the animals have a pretty rough life. The Tibetan says that mankind will be the savior for the animals, that they're going to make that we are going to make life a lot more pleasant for the animal kingdom. Now, I don't know what we would do for these elk. Maybe we will like build structures for them to have a more comfortable habitat in the wintertime, and provide them with more food in the wintertime so that they won't have to suffer so much hunger. And so anyway, this farmer kind of had the right idea. He maybe had an impulse. His impulse, as part of the plan, was to go help out those elk that were starving to death. That might have been his little piece of the plan that he got an inspiration to do, because what he was doing was making life much more pleasant for those elk that were starving to death. And so the Tibetan talks about that this is the basic direction the man will take with the animals. We're getting much more sympathetic to the suffering of the animal kingdom than I was when I was a kid. And this kind of dawned on me when the big story of in Idaho, one of the few times we made national headlines when I was younger was when, I think it was in the 80s, when Jimmy Carter was president, or maybe the 70s. that the farmers in southern Idaho were being overrun by these jackrabbits. And so they got together in groups. All the farmers got together with clubs, and they surrounded all these jackrabbits and clubbed them to death. And some reporter got a hold of this story and reported it, and it become international news how these lowlifes in Idaho were clubbing these poor rabbits to death. And when this story broke out, it dawned on me. I thought, well, when I was a kid, nobody thought anything of killing a jackrabbit. And now the whole world is alarmed that these farmers are out killing jackrabbits, and they're killing them to save their crops. It was either jackrabbit or their crops. So but the way they did it was what really made the news. They did it with clubs. And if they would just shot them, that they probably wouldn't have made the news. But they took baseball bats and clubs and went out and formed a line, and they attacked those jackrabbits, and that really made the news. But that really made it dawn on me how more sensitive humanity was becoming to the animal kingdom. Because when I was a kid in the 50s, it's like people just felt that animals didn't have pain the way we do or something. I remember when I was in high school, the teacher, biology teacher, dissected this frog, and he had the poor frog cut open, and the frog was still alive, and his heart was out of his body still beating. And man, I really felt sorry for that frog. And the teacher said, well, don't worry, he can't feel any pain. And I thought, well, speak to yourself for yourself. I bet he feels some pain. But that was the attitude when I was a kid of all the adults was, if you brought some pain to an animal, it's no big deal because they don't feel pain the way we do. And, but, you look at a dog, you pinch your dog, it'll feel the pinch just as much as you do. And if you step on your dog's foot, what does he do? He yelps, doesn't he? He feels it. But people are a lot more sensitive to animals now, and also plants. We want to do our best to preserve them. We're almost going overboard about preserving things, because the Tibetan talks about the importance of, he says, species will come and go. He says a lot of species will disappear in the near future, he predicts, but then he predicts a lot of new species will also show up. So we don't really need to go to extraordinary means to preserve species, but just let them naturally come and go. But we shouldn't take them out either. So we got to reach a middle ground there. Okay, next he talks about that one thing humanity will do, it will bring in additional light. Humanity is a planetary light bearer, transmitting the light of knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. And right now, he says, we're stuck on knowledge. We're transmitters of knowledge, but we're lacking wisdom and understanding. Wisdom and understanding will come later, but look at the knowledge that we've gathered in the past couple hundred years. And the destiny of humanity is to be transmitters of knowledge, and we've slowly accumulated knowledge through the thousands of years. And now just think, just in my lifetime, I was born in 1945, and it's amazing how much more knowledge we have now. At the punch of a button on your computer, you can put in a keyword or ask a question on Google and get an answer to billions of facts right at your fingertips. When I was a kid, if I wanted to ask a question, I either had to find somebody that knew it or go to the library and do a search. And if it wasn't at the library, then, well, you could get an interlibrary loan. And to find the books outside the library, you had to go through this great big books of directories to find the books, but to find knowledge was very difficult when I was a kid. The best thing to do when I was young was just to absorb all the knowledge you could along the way and then have it in your memory. Now we don't have to have it all in our memory. We can just Google it and it's right there. So humanity is right now a strong transmitter of knowledge, but because we lack wisdom and understanding, our use of knowledge falls short. How does it fall short? How about the knowledge of the atomic bomb? Is that a problem right now? Yeah.
It falls short because it falls short because it's not being applied properly.
Right. We take knowledge like we're learning right now how to splice genes and everything, and put human DNA and mix pig DNA together to make organs, and then some wise guy gets these weird ideas like, I wonder what would happen if we crossed a pig and a human. What kind of thing would that create? And they get these stupid ideas, and they don't mix them with wisdom and understanding. And according to legend, this was why the earth was destroyed in ancient times, was because man gained quite a bit of knowledge and he used it incorrectly, created weird species that turned into almost monsters that needed to be destroyed. And so and we're on the verge of doing this again. I've read a number of stories that can't be confirmed, but that scientists in secret have developed some kind of catastrophic mixes of the species that weren't publicized, and they were so devastated by what they produced they had to kill it. And so I don't know if that's true, but if it's certainly plausible, because there's all kinds of experiments. When a scientist or humanity gets knowledge of something, they want to see how far they can take it. And different people I've read that have taken people back to past civilizations and also other planets that have had life on other planets where they've had destruction. One of the main causes of the destruction of other planets that people have lived on, that they have been taken back through regression, is that once humanity gets a knowledge of something, they want to see how far they can take it. They want to see what species they can create. They want to see what they can do with it. And what they can do with it often turns out to be harmful and often begins to lay the seeds of their own destruction. And so this is what we want to avoid, and we will avoid it by taking our next step into making wisdom dominant. Okay, we are a light to the world as far as knowledge goes, but knowledge can be used for good or bad until wisdom and understanding begins to dominate. What do you think this world would be like if the knowledge that we had was dominated with wisdom and understanding? Can you imagine how the world would be different?
Heaven on earth, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, we would probably have no poor among us. We wouldn't have any threat of war. We wouldn't we would be a completely constructive force as far as the animals and the plant kingdom and the mineral kingdom go. We would be a benevolent force on the earth. And this is where we're headed. We're getting some wisdom, but not as much as we need yet. And this is what's going to bring in the new age of peace and harmony, is when wisdom begins to dominate. And this is why we need points of light. People like right here in this group, people that are listening to this, are people that are seeking light and wisdom and understanding. And these are the type of people that will spread the wisdom. Because spreading wisdom is a little bit like lighting a candle and, then lighting another candle and lighting another candle. This is what we have to do to make wisdom dominate. As far as the transmitting of energy, DK makes this interesting statement. It says, and man's achievement and spiritualization is the hope of the world. Mankind itself is the world savior, of which all world saviors have been but a symbol and the guarantee. Interesting statement. All the world saviors, so think of Jesus, for instance. He says, so Jesus is a symbol and a guarantee that humanity will be a world savior. Okay. Then the fourth thing that will happen will be the blending of the deva or angel evolution with the human. That's an interesting statement. The first part of the blending of the angel evolution with the human is the blending of your solar angel, which is a very advanced deva, with your own self. But there are many other devas. On this planet, there are 60 billion monads designated for the human kingdom. But there are 140 billion deva lives. Now, some of the deva lives are advanced who passed through humanity and then went on to a higher evolution in the deva kingdom, which is called symbolic of the angel kingdom. And then there's less evolved devas that have not gone through the human kingdom. These lesser evolved devas don't have free will the way we think of free will. They don't have an understanding of self. They are controlled by higher forces and higher lives. So if you contacted any of the lower devas, they will do what you tell them to do. They're looking for instruction.
Like elementals?
Yeah, elementals form bodies of the lower deva lives, right? So he says eventually the deva lives they don't have physical bodies like us, but they have the etheric bodies. And we've talked about the etheric double. You can even see it by putting your thumbs together against a white background and looking at the space between them. You can actually see the edge of your etheric body there. And the deva lives have etheric bodies, which is, DK tells us, is still physical matter, but it's a higher grade of matter that's beyond what we call matter. He calls the dense physical, and what he calls the physical embraces also the etheric. Okay. He says, anyway, we'll have a blending of these lives, and eventually we will have a lot of people that will be able to see the various deva lives. Jeffrey Hudson was the guy that had really good etheric vision, and he saw deva lives all around him, and he described them. He gave a lot of intimate details about what they look like, and some deva lives are really big. He says each mountain, for instance, has a big deva associated with it, and it may be like 20 feet tall even. And then he says there's like elves and fairies, which are only maybe a foot tall or so. And then he talks about that others, we think, he says the reason we think that angels have wings is because a lot of these devas have pulsating light around them that look like wings. He says, but they're not really wings, but they're pulsating light that looks like they're flying with wings, which I found an interesting statement. But anyway, we're going to be more united with them and work more with the Deva lives as we move ahead. He says, harmful magnetic conditions as a result of man's wrong handling of force are the causes of the evil in the world around us, including the subhuman kingdoms. So man's wrong handling of force produces all the evils that we see about us in all the kingdoms, basically. So if there's a disease in the animal kingdom, it's caused in large part by what humanity radiates. And as we move away from just centering ourselves on knowledge and what knowledge can do, scientific knowledge, when we move into using it with wisdom, we will begin to radiate a higher form of energy, and the health of the whole planet will just move up a notch. Okay, that's probably all we got time for now, unless we have any questions. Any questions or comments before we move ahead?
Comes up here.
Okay, we'll end with the song of the 144,000. And after we say it, we're going to have a period of silence and visualize yourself being one with your soul as you say it. Om. We thank you, Father, that you have revealed to us your protective universal light. That within this light is complete protection from all destructive forces. That the Holy Spirit of your presence permeates us in the light. And wherever we will the light to descend. We thank you, Father, that you fill us with your protective fires of love. That within this love is complete protection from all destructive thoughts and feelings. That the consciousness of Christ is lifted up in us in this love. And wherever we will, the love to be inflamed. We thank you, Father, that you are in us and we are in you. That through us your will is sent forth on wings of power. That your purpose is accomplished on earth as it is in heaven. That through us your light and love and power is manifest to all the sons and daughters of mankind. Now we'll sound the Om and visualize yourself sounding it. Visualize your soul and you sounding it together. Om. Om, 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 om. Well, thank you, my friends. Thank you for being here, and we will see you next week. I guess we'll do next week around 2 o'clock. Seems to be about as good as any, 2 and 10. between those two time zones, we catch everybody one time or another.
Okay.
We will see you next week.
Thanks,
Thank you,
JJ.
JJ.
Thanks, JJ.
Thank you.
You betcha.
Night.
Thank you.
Night.
Good night, everyone.
All right.